Okay, this one is a little personal one, a little pep talk from me for any life coaches and therapists out there that are doubting the thought of putting themselves out there, of the work that they do and the validity. And this can even exist between life coaches and therapists, because I know that life coaches do not work or train, to the same standard that therapists do. Therapy is very different. You have to go through a lot of targets of training to get that status. Life coaching as an unregulated kind of zone, and yes, there's accreditations, etc., and certifications, of which I've got some of those things, but it's a lot more Wild West Cowboy-esque. Now, sometimes that makes us think in either situation, because this doesn't just happen regardless of your qualification, but that's one of the real key areas I know as a coach you come across, which is, therapists are out there, they can do a better job than that. There's a level of doubt then that comes from other people. Well, why aren't you a therapist then? Like, what is the difference between you and a therapist? And like, oh, is that not right? And obviously coming from potentially some therapists, kind of get that vibe. And this probably happens to therapists too, not from the other way necessarily, or maybe it does, because there's then a little bit of a kind of, not fights, but animosity, but also just this idea in the way that you've been trained as a therapist. There are things that undermine you and your work. Well, why do I need you? There's an app for that. I can meditate, I can learn from this book, I can do this. And it doesn't feel right that we, whether we're a life coach or therapist, sometimes it doesn't feel right to sometimes make money from what we're doing. It doesn't feel right to, we're helping, we're giving back. We shouldn't be profiting from this, and we shouldn't be looking to build an audience and be known for this, because is that not a bit playing into our ego? Is that not that's against what I'm here? I'm just here to help people. And that's the truth of the matter. It's that life coaches, therapists, teachers even as well, given my background, they genuinely the ones that are shaping the future. But I think when it comes to life coaching therapists, we're doing that through every conversation we have, for every client that we meet. And if you choose to have a podcast, through every podcast episode that you have. And we're in this space where connection, true deep connection, is at an all-time low. You'd have heard before, my whole thing for the Single Girl's Guide to Life was to create deeper connection, because that's what people were craving. They were just doing it in really desperate ways, chasing relationships that weren't good for them, but that was all they could get their hands on. It's all that they could see that they could get their hands on. It's all that people talked about. It's what people encouraged them to do. And that's not just the only form. We've got people disconnected from the work that they do. We've got people disconnected because of the things that happen in normal life, like grief and things like that. And it was the book by Johann Hari, Lost Connections, that brought this all to my attention. He puts it together very succinctly, doesn't he? But therapists and life coaches are the ones that are out there really developing this, that are standing at the forefront, and they're making things happen because they're trained to hold the space. They're trained to listen to what people have to say and to really hear what they're saying, not just accept the first answer that's given. We all know we can't just accept the first answer that's given. But we're trained to listen and listen carefully and ask these interesting questions, guided or not quite so guided, and give space and release and let happen and form plans for the future or explore the past, depending on where you are. And because of that encouragement and that training that goes on, if you do it properly, it feels weird to then take up space, to be there saying this is what you should do, to be there giving advice, a phrase that, gosh, shouldn't be said. But the issue comes when we're trying to market these ambiguous questions, these open questions, that is the tool and the technique of how some of you do some of your work, limits you in terms of marketing. In the previous episode, 2 episodes ago, I was talking about the concept of not being late to the party and how to stand out online. And part of that was to niche down and really be about this one person, this one problem. And then you're thinking, well, I've got to talk about that person in context. I've got to be specific. Where I know some of you work very generally. It's not just one person you help. It could be male, female. It could be an 18-year-old or an 80-year-old. the range is vast. But when it comes to marketing, we have to think slightly differently, and we have to understand that niching helps us speak to our potential clients, a growing audience, easier, quicker, more effectively. And then we also then have this element where we have to start taking up more space than we have ever been used to taking up, because we have to be visible. And it isn't about you. It isn't about being a celebrity, being an influencer. This is about having impact. Even the greatest in the world knew that they needed to speak to lots of people and get in front of lots of people to do the work that they did. You know, think of any leader. They were speaking. They're used to speaking, whether it's on TV, in front of crowds, whatever it might be. They're used to speaking, and they do assert things, their beliefs, their opinions, things that are right for the group that they're really focusing on the most. And every leader, even think of politics right now, every leader, whilst you may not agree with him, if you can evaluate and see that they're actually doing quite a good job for just one group, and that's always the issue. I think the job of a prime minister is the worst job to have in the world, because you have to prioritise certain groups at certain points, and that in turn means that other groups are not overlooked, but maybe deprioritised. The most recent thing I read this morning was that the whole concept of equality is going to be looked at by the current government, and they're going to add not just race, gender, sex, etc., and sexuality. They're going to also add in, or there's talk of adding in, elements of socioeconomic status, so your class, in terms of this, and that this might need to be factored into things like when you're applying to uni. I don't know if it goes as far as jobs. It's new in its infancy. Now, the headline that the Daily Mail came up with made something about the middle class and getting rid of it or taking another blow. And this is a really difficult concept to understand if you're from the middle class, because, well, Labour's meant to be for everyone. Yeah, but the middle class are doing better than the average person. It might not feel like it. Totally appreciate that. Might not feel like it right now. You've been squeezed because of the cost of living crisis. But there's still people before the cost of living crisis that weren't doing well. And then the cost of living crisis meant they had to start using food banks. And now the food banks are, more and more busy, and everything continues to creep up. And so the middle class are going, oh, well, I'm going to give up a holiday this year. We're not going to go away abroad. We're going to do X, Y, Z in the UK instead or something. When those in lower classes, working classes, weren't even going on holiday anyway. Or they were using their £9.50 Sun holiday camping voucher or caravan holiday. That has always been their version of a holiday, if they've even managed to stretch to that. So it's really difficult to understand that from both sides. But you have to understand that in this situation, the Prime Minister has prioritised and followed what he said he would do, which is even the playing field. That comes at a cost. It comes at a cost to those that are advantaging or taking advantage from the system. And we could do a whole other podcast on, is it fair? Does it discourage hard work? Should hard work be penalised in this way? Is it always hard work, though? We could go on about that. And it is something I would explore. I'm not afraid to have those conversations. Just maybe not right now. But if you can understand that Keir Starmer has to piss some people off in order to stand up for what he believes is right. You probably don't believe it's right, potentially, at the same time. Especially if you've got a business. You probably have, in most cases, some level of a middle-class-esque background. So we have to get used to this idea of establishing ourselves, of honing down a little bit in one, even if it means shutting off ourselves to the rest, if it means criticism from other people. And remembering it's not about the ego part, it's about the impact part. It's about helping the people that you're trying to help. It's about standing up for them. And this isn't about creating baity content either. Of course, I'm going to teach you some techniques to get seen. I know some of the techniques to get seen. We only have to look at some very unfavourable and unsavoury characters to see the kind of techniques that they use. And if I'm honest, I'm not really here for it. I'm not here for it because one of the most effective ways to get seen online is to divide and conquer. divide opinion and push people to the most extreme of that. And this is where we've got these whole concepts of adolescence and the incel community. Like, that is a very well pushed to one end of the spectrum group of people that are now getting angry, and they have certain beliefs and they've been influenced in a particular way. It's a very easy thing to do. The more extreme, the better. More attention, more conflict, and you get this very loyal and dedicated group of people. But do I think that is the best way to get attention online and to serve the world? No, I don't. We still need to put our opinions out there. We still need to create some tension, but it doesn't need to be in a way that is so deconstructive for society. What we need is these intimate, long-form pieces of content that explain that. I'd like to think that what you've just heard from me today hasn't put you off what I've just said. What I'd like to think is that it shows me as someone that's quite aware of what's going on, quite balanced, quite knowledgeable. And actually, that if you are going to grow, it's not about the gimmick. God, I've never been about the gimmick. I've done the gimmicks a couple of times. When you first start out, you're trying things and you're thinking, oh, this is going to do something for my business. Oh, and I just regret the day ever of doing certain things. And then there weren't even that many. And I don't even think, like, I was just doing trends, for example, a very, very common approach to use now. Trends. And there was the one where you dance, like this, if you're watching, in front of this song. Don't know what the song was, but it was like, it had a green screen of 5 guys and a girl, I think it was, doing the same thing. And you had some caption over the top. It went viral. It didn't... It went viral and it didn't really do a lot for me. I got loads of likes. I don't remember it getting too many follows, and even the follows I did get, I remember thinking, this isn't who I was trying to get in front of. And that's not what we're doing with what content we're creating. As coaches, as therapists, we're not chasing the virality. Obviously, if something pops off, wonderful. But we're creating something that can help people even if they can't afford it. And sure, I know that you want people that can afford it to come through your business. Obviously. But isn't it great to think that, yeah, I'm doing this stuff for the business and to grow it and to get seen, but at the same time, anyone that cannot, anyone that can't stretch to that, can listen, even with ads, to Spotify. Hopefully, if they've got an internet connection and some sort of device to listen on, they can listen and still benefit. Because, yeah, you do want money. You do want success. I come from teaching. And if you've done teaching for any significant length of time, I did it for 10 years, still in it in some ways, just not as full time. You aren't doing that for the money. There is a part of you that has gone, well, I'm not going to enter the corporate world and I'm not going to chase all of the money in that way. I'm going to work here with something that makes me feel good, that gives back. That is teachers that are there for a long time, that care and do their job well until the end. Not every teacher does. The same for therapy and the same for life coaches. There are good and bad teachers around. There are good and bad therapists around. There are good and bad life coaches around. And hey, every teacher? Most teachers have some level of qualification. They had to do some sort of teacher training at the very least. Most of them do have a degree, but not all. Not all. They have to do teacher training. It doesn't mean that they're all good at what they do. Unfortunately so. But the point is the good ones are doing it for a good reason, and for some time at least, I think most teachers compromise their pay. I mean, I don't think it's the worst pay in the world, but I do think for the amount of hours you do, it's maybe not the same payoff as if you do some other things. And so by that default of being one of these kind of characters, a teacher, life coach, a therapist, you're a helping person. You're a person that wants to do good, that wants to make people better. And so it's kind of coming to that adjustment as well, that like, it's okay to want to make money, to want to have success, to want to have a podcast, to be known, if we're going to help the world in a stronger way. It's why I truly believe that these people, the good ones in there, the ones that do it, and they need to structure it right with business to be sustainable for them. Else they're just going to burn out. They're going to have a really expensive side hustle, hobby even, and they're not going to get anything back from it. They need to have energy. They need to have security. They need to have cash flow in their business to make sure that they can keep doing the podcast, keep doing the programs, keep doing the work to change the world in a great way. I truly believe this group of people are the 21st century changemakers. It's where we're headed. I don't know what's going to happen when we have like the metaverse and how these people are going to fit into that. I think the situation is going to get worse in part because the concept of us all being in like some virtual world. Like, what happens to human touch and things like that? Ugh. So it's something to move with, that one. But it's our job to keep doing the work that we're doing and get it out there in the most effective ways, amplify it as much as possible. And the beautiful thing is that you get to control the narrative. You get to lead on a podcast, especially one where you've established it that you're the host. And that's it. That's just you. It's just you talking. It's not interviewing other people. It comes at a later point to do that. But if you're growing your podcast, it is about you and your thoughts and establishing some of those thoughts and sharing those thoughts and creating this community. And this tool, the power of your voice leads into bringing in new perspectives. It leads to all of these micro shifts for people, these little improvements that people can make in their lives and make little changes and maybe big changes that can have this incredible ripple effect, cumulative effect, and just move the world into this state of healing, of making the world a better place than it was before. And I know that this works because I've had so many messages from people. There's one person in particular that worked with me a little bit deeper, and they are still with the person they met as part of the program. I mean, I can't predict when people are going to meet people, but we managed to get her into a state where she was ready to find someone properly. She'd done some of the work. She was ready to date with intention, and she's still with them, coming up for 3 years later, and they're moving in together soon, which I'm absolutely buzzing about. Look, you can't put a price on meeting someone that someone feels, from their own description, that they're completely aligned with, that they're happy, and they're hopefully going to have, they're going to have the life that they want. And if they do bring any children into the world, they're going to bring it in, and it's all going to be nice and healthy. Even if, they don't stay together forever, even if it doesn't all quite work out, hopefully, and from what my understanding is that they're having a great time. They didn't rush. They felt ready. They felt like they were going to do the right thing for them. And all of that speaking out was the good in the world that I put out, and it's still there, still exists. Anyone can find it. Anyone can keep seeing the content, and anyone can still realise that they're not alone. And just because I'm not actively a life coach doesn't mean that life coaching work, falls to the wayside. I'm not just a coach. You're not just a coach or a therapist. You're part of helping the world heal. You're part of the actual cultural change that we need right now desperately. So if no one has handed you the microphone yet, it is time to pick it up. It is time to start telling your story in your way and start establishing yourself in that little extra space in your way, owning your story, sharing it and using it to help the world develop. I hope that's giving you something to think about, a little bit of validation for being a life coach, a therapist, knowing that your voice is what's needed to get you seen, to do your work that you're probably doing really well already, out there into the world. Until next time, stay bold, stay visible, and stay ready to be heard.